I was 19 years old when a doctor finally noticed the faint scars around my lips and whispered in shock, "Who would do something so cruel to you?" For almost 20 years, I had lived in silence, not because I couldn't speak, but because I was terrified too. The entire town believed I was born mute. The truth was much darker. Hello, my dear friends. My name is Elizabeth, though everyone here in Port Haven calls me Beth. I'm 67 years old now, and these days my life is calm and simple. I live in a small coastal town in South Carolina where the ocean breeze slips through open windows and the sound of seagulls wakes you every morning. Right now, I'm standing in my kitchen preparing my famous cheese biscuits for the Saturday farmers market. The old wooden stove crackles softly while warm air fills the room with buttery smells. This little baking business keeps me busy and helps me spoil my grandchildren, which is my greatest joy. 5 years ago, when my pension wasn't enough anymore, I started baking for neighbors. Word spread fast. Now people come from nearby towns just to buy Miss Beth's biscuits. Life feels peaceful now, safe, but it wasn't always like this. There was a time when fear ruled every breath I took. Sometimes, when I look around this cozy kitchen, I have to remind myself this life is real because my childhood was nothing like this warm. It was cold, quiet, and full of secrets. I was born in Port Haven in 1958. My mother died 6 months after giving birth to me, and 2 years later my father drowned during a storm at sea that left me in the care of my grandfather, Frank, a respected fisherman who owned the most popular seafood shop in town. To the world, he was a hardworking, religious man who never missed Sunday church. To me, he was something else entirely. We lived behind the seafood shop in a small apartment that smelled constantly of salt and fish. I grew up stacking ice boxes, scrubbing floors, and carrying heavy crates long before my arms were strong enough. Lazy children don't eat, Grandpa used to say. While other kids played in the streets, I worked, and I learned very early that questions were dangerous. My grandfather controlled everything: where I went, who I spoke to, when I slept. His voice was always calm, but his eyes carried something that froze me from the inside. From as young as 6 years old, I understood there were things that happened in our home that must never be talked about. Never. There was a locked basement under the shop that I wasn't allowed near. Strange men came through the back door before sunrise and disappeared downstairs for hours. And sometimes at night I heard noises I couldn't explain. Dragging sounds, machines running, smells that weren't fish. Whenever I looked at Grandpa afterward, he'd stare back silently, and I'd look away. Fear taught me obedience. Fear taught me silence. By the time I was 12, I wasn't a child anymore. I was already exhausted, nervous, and constantly watching my surroundings. And that was only the beginning of the nightmare. But everything changed the night I followed a sound into the basement and discovered what my grandfather had really been hiding all those years. The basement door was always locked, heavy, rusted, cold to the touch. My grandfather kept the key on a chain around his neck, hidden beneath his shirt. He told everyone it was just storied old knits, broken equipment, things not worth touching. But I knew better, because at night, when the town slept, I heard sounds, slow dragging noises, metal grinding, and once in a while, muffled cries. The first time curiosity defeated my fear. I was 10 years old. It happened late one evening after the shop had closed. Grandpa was asleep upstairs, his snore shaking the thin walls. I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling when I heard something heavy hit the basement floor. My heart started racing. I told myself not to move, but my feet did anyway. I crept down the stairs barefoot, every step whispering against the wood. The moonlight coming through the shop windows painted pale lines across the floor. And there it was, the basement door. Not fully closed, just slightly open, a thin strip of darkness breathing from inside. I should have turned back, but I didn't. I pushed the door slowly. The smell hit me. First, not fish, not salt, something thick and rotten that burned my nose. Inside, dim light flickered from a single hanging bulb. I saw large metal machines, buckets stacked against the wall, and stains on the concrete floor that looked too dark to be watered. And in the corner, something covered with a tarp. Before I could move closer, a hand grabbed my arm. Hard, I screamed. My grandfather yanked me back so violently I nearly fell. His face wasn't calm anymore. It was twisted with fury. "Never come down here again," he hissed in my ear. "Children who stick their noses where they don't belong disappear." He shook me once, hard enough to make my teeth click. "Do you understand me?" I nodded wildly, tears pouring down my face. That night, I didn't sleep at all. After that, the strangers came more often. Bothmen would arrive before dawn through the back door. Sometimes they brought travelers, people whose cars had broken down, tourists passing through town. Grandpa always smiled warmly. "Come inside, I'll help you out." They trusted him. Everyone did. But none of those people ever left. I heard the footsteps going down. I heard the door lock. And hours later, I heard screaming. I covered my ears. I prayed. I begged God to make me deaf. But the sounds carved themselves into my memory. When I turned 16, Grandpa made me quit school. "Girls don't need education," he said. "You work here now, from sunrise to sunset." I cleaned fish, scrubbed floors, hauled ice. My hands were constantly bleeding. My body was always sore. But the real horror began when I turned 18. One morning he woke me before dawn. "Come downstairs." His voice was calm, too calm. The basement door was open. Blood covered the floor. Buckets were full. The machines were wet. My stomach twisted violently. "Clean it," he said, handing me bleach and a mop. I threw up instantly. He watched without emotion. "When you're done vomiting," he said quietly, "clean that too." I understood then. I wasn't just a witness. I was trapped, and I would never be allowed to leave. But my grandfather wasn't finished controlling me yet. Soon, he would make sure I could never tell a soul what I had seen, using a threat so terrifying it would steal my voice for years. After that morning in the basement, fear became my shadow. Every week, sometimes twice a week, strangers came through the back door. Sometimes tourists, sometimes lonely travelers. Once, even someone from a nearby town. Each time, the same pattern: friendly welcome, quiet basement, screams in the night, blood to clean at dawn. My hands learned horrors no teenager ever should, and my heart slowly broke into pieces. But my grandfather wasn't satisfied with controlling my body. He wanted control of my silence too. One night, a few months after the first cleanup, I was lying in bed staring into darkness when I heard my bedroom door creak open. I didn't move. I pretended to sleep. The mattress sank as he sat beside me. I could smell the sea and fish on his clothes. "Elizabeth," he whispered softly, "have you been thinking about telling anyone what happens here?" My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. I shook my head quickly. "No, Grandpa, I swear." He turned on the lamp. In his hands was a metal tackle box. He opened it slowly. Inside were thick needles, fishing hooks, and long, clear nylon thread, the same thread used to fix nets. He lifted one needle and calmly slid the thread through it. "You know what happens to fish that open their mouths too much?" he asked quietly. My body froze. "They end up on a hook." Then he leaned closer and grabbed my chin. Hard. The cold tip of the needle touched my lips, not piercing, just close enough to feel it. "If you ever speak," he whispered, "I will sew your mouth shut slowly, just like fixing a torn net." Stitch by stitch, tears poured down my face, but I didn't make a sound. Undeceived, I nodded desperately. He placed the needle on my bedside table, where I could see it clearly. "Good, now sleep." From that night on, something inside me died. I stopped talking almost completely at first. I answered in whispers, then in nods. Soon, not at all. People in town noticed. "Frank's granddaughter is so shy," they said. "Poor girl, she barely speaks." My grandfather made it better for himself. He told everyone I had been born with a speech problem. "She's a sweet girl, just quiet," he'd say sadly. And they believed him. Why wouldn't they? He was such a good man. So Naya was known as the mute girl from the seafood shop, and being silent kept me alive. The basement horrors continued. But now, I carried them alone. Then came the worst discovery of all. My grandfather started selling a new product at the shop. Meat pies. People loved them. They said the meat was incredibly tender, different special. They lined up every weekend. I knew where that meat came from. Every bite made me sick, but fear glued my mouth shut at 19. I was barely a person anymore, just a ghost, moving through life. cleaning blood, hiding screams, trapped in silence. I thought this would be my life forever. Until my body finally gave up, and an illness took me to a doctor who noticed something no one else ever had. But when the doctor saw the scars around my lips, his face turned white with horror, and everything my grandfather had hidden for years was about to be exposed. The fever started quietly. At first, it was just a sore throat and chills, but within days, my whole body burned like fire. I couldn't swallow water without crying. My legs trembled when I tried to stand. On the third day, I collapsed on the bedroom floor. That's when my grandfather finally decided I was too sick to work, not because he cared, but because he needed me alive. He dragged me to the town health clinic early that morning, gripping my arm tightly. "You will not speak?" he whispered sharply. "Only open your mouth when the doctor tells you. Nothing more." The clinic was bright and crowded. Mothers held crying children. Old men coughed into handkerchiefs. Life felt unreal around me, normal, peaceful, while I felt like I was dying. A nurse called my name. We were led into a small exam room where a young doctor waited, Dr. Harrison. He had kind eyes and a calm voice, the kind of person who made you feel safe just by being near him. He checked my temperature very high. He listened to my heart, felt my swollen throat, and frowned. Then he said something my grandfather didn't expect. "Sir, I need to examine Elizabeth alone." Clinicality. My grandfather stiffened. "She doesn't speak well," he argued. "She gets confused." But the doctor didn't back down. After a long pause, Grandpa left the room, shooting me a warning look. The moment the door closed, silence filled the room. Dr. Harrison sat in front of me gently. "Elizabeth," he said softly, "can you speak?" Tears welled up in my eyes. I tried. No sound came. He nodded slowly, understanding. "It's okay. Let's take a look at your throat." I opened my mouth. He shined a small light inside, examining carefully. Then the light dropped slightly. My lips, his breath caught. He leaned closer. His hands started to shake. "Elizabeth," he whispered, "these marks around your mouth, these aren't natural." My heart pounded. "They look like healed stitches," he said slowly. "Someone pierced your skin here." Over and over. Tears burst down my face. He swallowed hard. "Did someone sew your mouth shut?" I nodded. Violently. His face drained of color. "Oh my God." He rushed to his desk, grabbed a pen and paper, and placed them in my trembling hands. "Right, what happened?" he said firmly. "I will protect you, but I need the truth." My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the pen. "But," I wrote, "about the basement, the screams, the blood, the threats, the meat pies." When he finished reading, he turned pale. Then he ran to the sink and vomited. After a moment, he wiped his face and looked at me with fierce determination. "This ends today," he said. "You're safe now." Suddenly pounding echoed on the door, my grandfather's angry voice. "What's taking so long?" Dr. Harrison stepped in front of the door like a shield. "I'm calling the police," he said calmly. And for the first time in my life, someone was fighting for me. But my grandfather wasn't about to surrender quietly. As police sirens approached, he began banging on the door, desperate, furious, and dangerous. The pounding on the clinic door grew louder. My grandfather's voice was no longer calm. "Open this door right now." Dr. Harrison stood firmly in front of it, his hand gripping the handle. "You will wait," he said. "This is a medical emergency." I sat trembling on the exam table, clutching the paper where I had written the truth. My whole body felt weak, but inside, something new was growing. Hope. Then, we heard it. Sirens. Growing closer. My grandfather froze. Dr. Harrison peeked through the window blinds and whispered, "They're here." The door burst open moments later, not by my grandfather, but by two police officers. They moved quickly, placing him in handcuffs as he shouted, "This is ridiculous. She's sick in the head. She lies." But no one listened. I was escorted gently out of the room, past the waiting patients who stared in confusion. Outside, sunlight felt strange on my face, like freedom. At the station, I told everything. My voice was shaky, weak from years of silence, but I spoke. Every scream, every threat, everybody in the basement. The officers' faces turned pale. That same afternoon, Police raided the seafood shop. They broke open the basement door. What they found confirmed it all. Blood-stained floors, hidden tools, personal belongings of missing people, even the machine my grandfather used. Over 20 victims. When the truth spread, Port Haven exploded in shock. The respected fisherman, the church-going grandfather, a monster. But the worst discovery, the meat pies, they were never beef, never pork. People became sick when they realized what they had been eating. The shop was closed forever. Yellow tape wrapped the building like a warning. My grandfather was sent to prison. He denied everything at first, but evidence buried him. 2 months later, another inmate ended his life behind bars. I felt no sadness, only relief. The nightmare was over. I stayed with Dr. Harrison and his wife while I healed. They treated me like family. I learned to speak again. First whispers, then sentences, then full conversations. Therapy helped me understand that silence had been survival, not guilt. Slowly, the town changed how they saw me. I was no longer the mute girl. I was the survivor. But healing wasn't quick. Nightmares haunted me. Fear followed me everywhere. Yet for the first time, I was free. And with freedom came a future I never believed I'd have. But survival was only the beginning. I still had to learn how to live again, how to trust, love, and build a life after so much darkness. Freedom felt strange at first thought for years. Fear had decided when I slept, when I spoke, and how I breathed. When it disappeared, I didn't know who I was without it. Dr. Harrison and his wife welcomed me into their home like a daughter. They helped me finish my education, took me to therapy, and reminded me every day that I was safe. Learning to speak again wasn't easy. My voice was weak, trembling like a scared child's. Some days I couldn't get words out at all. Other days, memories crashed into me so hard I couldn't breathe. But slowly, I healed. The nightmares faded. The fear loosened its grip, and my voice returned. The town eventually stopped whispering and started supporting me. People apologized for not seeing the signs, for trusting the wrong man, for staying silent too. I learned something important during those years. Survival is not weakness. Silence was how I stayed alive. At 22, I got my first real job at a fabric shop. It felt incredible, earning honest money, not cleaning blood, not hiding secrets. That's where I met James. That's who was gentle, kind, patient. When I finally told him everything, he just held my hands and said, "The past doesn't define you. Your strength does." We married a few years later. Together we built a life full of love, 3 beautiful children, a small home near the church. Laughter replacing fear. Years passed. The seafood shop was torn down and replaced by a playground. A place of horror became a place of joy. And I smiled every time I saw children playing there. After James passed away years later, I thought loneliness would swallow me. But my children, grandchildren, and my little biscuit business filled my days with purpose. Every Saturday morning I baked before sunrise, just like I once worked before sunrise, but now with peace instead of terror. People line up at my stand, they smile, they call me Miss Beth, and they know nothing about the girl who once couldn't speak. Sometimes I still wake from bad dreams, but I remind myself, I survived, I escaped, I won, and now I tell my story for those who are still trapped in silence, because darkness survives unquiet, but truth destroys it. If you're afraid, speak. If you're hurting, seek help. Your voice is powerful and your life is worth saving. Your silence does not protect evil. It protects you only until you are safe enough to speak. And when you do speak, everything can change.